Hi, it's Larold, and I've put together an absolutely incredible setup for leveling any character in Path of Exile 2 quickly, painlessly, and cheaply. This whole setup cost less than a divine, although you can definitely spend more on it if you want more power, more speed. I got pretty lucky about 2 days ago and had 3 of the main leveling uniques that I'm using in this setup drop all while I was mapping in the span of like 20 minutes. And I got multiple lucky corrupts on them as well, and I felt like that must be a sign that I needed to level a new character. To be honest, I was having a lot of fun on the Fulminating Concoction Pathfinder, didn't really feel like I needed to level another one, but this just felt like too many strokes of good luck to ignore, so I went with it, and this setup and this experience of leveling this character really exceeded every single expectation I could have had, so definitely wound up being a good decision to not ignore those signs. I was hoping to recreate the experience of Smite Hollow Palm leveling from PoE 1, which, if you're not familiar, is basically just a unique setup in which you, unequip your weapons and gloves, stack a bunch of dexterity, and then blast everything insanely hard. It's really great once it comes online, but that usually requires hitting around level 17 or level 19 or so it takes a little bit. Not so for this Path of Exile 2 setup. You can start using this at level 2, as soon as you venture out of the first encampment, and it's pretty much fully online from that point, with only one major skill change in Act 2 that really just changes you from using Cold, Glacial Cascade, into Stormwave on your main as your main clearing skill. That's kind of it. And as you can see, it blasts. It is so fast, you just stack strength so you have tons of health, and it just is so strong in every single way you would want it to be. And best of all, because of the way that PoE 2's small passive travel nodes allow you to choose your stat, you can do this as literally any character, and it just works. It's so good. I completed the entire campaign deathless. I did my first trial of the Sekima hitless in like 6 minutes, and best of all, I just had a really fun time from start to finish. There was never a moment where I was having a bad time, and that is a huge upgrade from PoE 1, even with speed leveling the first act is pretty tedious. I think ultimately GGG's never gonna let players just skip the campaign. I'm fine with that, I've accepted it. And, that's whatever, but it does mean that this kind of build is absolutely necessary, and I think GGG making this setup usable from level 1 is their way of saying they realize that too. So this is a setup you can run all the way through the entire campaign and into early mapping. You can also spec out of it midway through if you want. It's entirely up to you how far you want to go, at what point you want to swap over to playing a minion build or something, but, also what you want to do with your Ascendancy is up to you as well. I did all of this as a Gimling Legionnaire, which is maybe the best character for it, maybe not, maybe that's Invoker Monk, but either way, it was so good, there was so much excess power that I could have done this with no Ascendancy, and it would have been completely amazing too. We'll recommend this. I will definitely be doing more with this character as well. Alright, before I move on to the full breakdown of everything in the build, everything in the setup, my channel manager Sunset and I did a stream last night of me finishing Acts 2 and 3 of the Cruel campaign with this setup and doing a bit of early mapping as well. The VOD for that is up on this channel. It's quite long, and you should definitely check that out if you want to see some of this character in action. I also didn't record a lot of Act 2 and 3, so there's not going to be that much footage of that in this either. And, I also just want to say thanks to Sunset and to everyone who tuned in and hung out on our random midnight stream. Alright, now I'm going to talk about gear. So this is going to be the same for every character. The skill gems are also going to be the same for every character. The only thing that'll really fluctuate from character to character will be the passive tree, obviously, since you have different origin points there. So there's a lot of gear, and I have made up trees for all the characters. I made up the mercenary one, put all the skills and gear options into it, and then I just made trees for the other 5 classes, because in case I want to change something, I don't want to have to do that data entry and then change it 6 times, and then kind of the same goes with all the gear. You can't copy over profiles with the max roll build planner, so it's easier to just make up kind of one and then make separate trees for all the rest of the guys. So the gear, you have a lot of options. As I put it in the max roll build planner, this is all the kind of stuff that I would use either at level 1 or the first 5 levels into this kind of Act 1 setup. You're using Pillar of the Cage God. This is the legendary or the unique that dropped for me first that kind of kicked off doing all of this. And it is really the thing that makes this whole build work, this whole setup work. It gives you increased weapon damage per 5 strength, and then that just stacks multiplicatively with any flat weapon damage that you're able to add. You do also get attack speed for Dex and area of effect for Int, and that helps. My attack speed's very fast, my area of effect's pretty big, and that is coming from having a decent amount of Dex and Int. But mostly the damage really just comes from strength, and then what you want to do is you just want to put 2 glacial runes in, and then you'll do a bunch of cold damage from the very start of the campaign. You'll absolutely be blasting right from the very start. Now, there are some really good leveling uniques that you can throw in as well. I use Blackheart. That's just like a ring you can use from level 1. You'll eventually want to swap this out, and probably the Pulsar Keln as well, which I started using at level 12 so that I could get very easy Herald of Ice pops by chilling enemies, just chilling them with a bit of cold damage, and then they'll do frozen explosions thanks to Herald of Ice. You know, you don't have to use those long term. You can use rings that look more like this once you get into your like level 20, 30, and beyond. Just look for rings that have like flat cold damage, flat lightning damage. Flat fire and fizz are also okay, but cold and lightning are definitely better. And then also strength, int, dex, those are also good as well. Now, you get a huge boost of strength right off the bat by putting on a Meganord's Girdle. I wore this the entire time. This just gives you, I believe the range on it is 40 to 50 strength, and then there's a bit of cold res as well. It's really not a great belt, but being able to start off this sort of strength stacking character with just an instant 40 to 50 free strength really fixes everything that you're doing on the character from the very beginning. I also used Fox Shade. This is just a very good leveling unique. It gives you 10% increased move speed when you're on full life. You are usually on full life, and really the most important thing you can get out of all of your gear while doing the campaign is just more move speed. So we're going to have move speed on our boots from the very start all the way to the very end. We have this one body armor that gives us move speed that we can use. It's very easy to equip, and that it's something you can put on at level 1 or level 2, I guess. And then there you go. You're just moving a little bit faster the whole campaign. As for the helm, Pearl still requires level 27. It gives you onslaught. It makes it so that you move 10% faster and you get 20% faster skill speed. You know, show off the difference in attack speed with and without it. It is definitely noticeable how much faster I attack. It's good. It's really just there for the move speed as well. But for the first 20-something levels or so, we have a couple of helmet options we can use at like level 1. There's Horns of Bindon. Not really anything all that special. But at level 5, you're able to get Greymake, which gives you just strength, dex, and int. It has pretty wide roll ranges. I have found a couple of these, and it's pretty good initially. You can use it at level 5, but then it reduces the amount of attributes you get per level you gain. So around the time that you're able to equip Thrill Steel, it's really only going to be giving you like 25 to all stats. And I think at that point, Onslaught really is better to have anyway, compared to like 20 all stats or whatever. As for the runes, all of the runes I'm using, you don't have to do this, but I am just simply socketing up every single item that I'm equipping, other than the weapon, with Artificer's Orbs, and then corrupting it and hoping for another socket. And then I am just slapping these in there. You can buy these from Alva or farm them by doing the Trial of Chaos. They're Soul Cores of Citaqualotl. They give you 5 all res. That's it. That's all that they do, but, you know, it's pretty good. That's pretty much all you're going for. It's just all res and all your pieces to kind of help compensate for the fact that, like, in my current gear, you know, I have very, very bad resistances. It's fine. Now, as for the weapon, the runes that you put in it really do have a big effect. Like, I can just show off I have this 3-socket, but with all of them empty weapon here. And right now, my DPS on Stormwave is 16,000. If I put that in with no runes and no, like, flat added damage corruption, I drop down to 13,000. That's a pretty big jump, you know, more than 10% damage. Even at the end of the campaign, and then obviously during the early parts of the campaign, this is so much of your damage. It's just coming from these 2 glacial runes. Now, you have a couple of options. You could get a 3rd socket, put a 3rd glacial rune in. That's fine. Or, you know, maybe a little more expensive, though. For, I think, a cheaper version is just to try and look for one that has corrupted flat damage on it, or just simply try and buy ones that aren't corrupted, put 2 sockets in them, corrupt them, and hope for the best. That's what I did with this, and it worked out for me. Now, as for the amulet, you have a couple of options. You can use the Everlasting Gaze for the start of Act 1. It'll give you a massive amount of mana. You won't have to think about mana at any point if you're using this, but you could get stats. You could get more damage and some more resistances out of another neck, and that's what I'm using here with Carnage Heart. Now, there are a couple of options I know some people like, and I saw this and thought about playing with it. Sure-Footed Sigil, it makes your dodge roll be longer. So I can just show off my dodge roll distance. You can see it's a very long dodge roll compared to the regular dodge roll, which is less distance. So it allows you to dodge roll instead of walking to move around, although I would need to swap out my boots because my stats are bad. It's an option for moving faster. I just really don't like dodge rolling everywhere. It just feels bad to me, so I would rather get Carnage Heart. Now, the ideal amulet for a stat stacker is Astramentus. The problem with Astromentis is that Astromentis gives you like 100, 120 all stats, but it also costs like 150 divines. Very valuable item. You know, instead we have Carnage Heart. Like, Mom, can we have Astromentis? We have Astromentis at home. It's Carnage Heart. It's not as good. It's 20 all stats at best. It's 20% reduced max life. It is a bit of all res, and then it's some completely worthless life leech. It's okay. I went with Carnage Heart instead because it costs like 1 Exalt instead of 150 divines, and then I anointed Siphon onto it just to help with mana a little bit. Not necessarily the best option, just something that was very cheap. A Paranoia, an Envy, and a Guilt. All right, now I'll just touch on the gloves and the boots that I used throughout the campaign. The first pair of gloves that I used from the start of the campaign was North Paw. These really aren't very good. They just add a little bit of physical damage to your attacks, but a little bit of physical damage goes a long way at the very start. They're literally better than nothing. That's kind of all they're for. At level 6, you can switch over to Yarn Griper. Now, the thing is, because you're leveling with a Pillar of the Cage God, you're leveling with a Quarterstaff, you're going to be using Monk skills. Monk skills all require Dex and Intelligence to be able to use. They're really not that bad in terms of the stat requirement, but there will be a little bit of a stat requirement, that is. So Yarn Griper makes it so that you get a bit of flat damage, you get a bit of life and attack speed, those are good, but mostly it just makes it so that you can use strength to satisfy the attribute requirements of melee weapons and melee skills. Well, all of the skills that Monk has, pretty much all of them that you're going to be using, especially early on, count as melee. Even things like Storm Wave, which, like, yeah, look at this, that's melee, huh? Hot melee action. I'm hitting off screen, but literally, it's a melee skill. AoE, melee, lightning. So that's kind of a cheat code for pretty much any ascendancy, anytime, or any class where you feel like you're struggling to maintain your stat requirements. If you find yourself in that situation, Yarn Griper is just a cheat code that overrides that entirely. Now, if you find yourself later on, you've got enough int, you've got enough dex, you're having no problem, you don't have to continue using these. You can just use a pair of gloves like these that just have a bunch of flat fizz, flat cold, flat lightning, flat fire on them, and then strength and dex, that'll work as well. If you want to spend big, once you get into kind of Act 2 Cruel, maybe Act 3 Cruel, level 52, you can get Hand of Wisdom in action. These are like 4 divines or so. I did not use these at all during the campaign. I played around with them a little bit post-campaign. These actually reward you more for using like int and dex more than a strength stacking build, so doesn't really synergize as well with what we're doing, but still like very good. Similarly, once you get higher up in level, if you wanted to drop Thrill Steel, if you feel you need to, you could use Gold Rim. That'll give you a lot of Ellie res. Pretty much that's all it gives you, but you know, like 30 Ellie res is pretty good. Or you could use Black Sun Crest. That'll give you a bunch of strength, dex, and int, and that's also very good. That is ultimately what I think you're going to want to be using if you go in sort of a stat stacking direction as your in-game character. And then finally, boots. Your starting pair of boots are going to be these Luminous Pace. You can use them from level 1. They give you 10% move speed. You can corrupt them, maybe get 12%. It's possible, not a huge deal. Around level 11, you can switch over to Wanderlust. Same type of deal. These have 20% move speed, and you're no longer slowable, which is nice. And this is something you can use for a really long time. 20% move speed as a roll on like rare boots, I think requires like level 30 or so, and these are available at level 11. I don't remember the exact number, maybe it's 25, but still, 20% move speed early on is very, very, very good. Now, I eventually moved over to just a pair of Bushwhacks that I found at level 33 that had 24% move speed. That's a little bit better than 20%. Not a huge difference, but a little bit better. So that worked. You could also use just any rare boots that have 25 move speed anytime you feel like upgrading from Wanderlust, or you could use those for the entire rest of the campaign. It's entirely up to you. All right, so that pretty much covers gear. Skill gems are a lot simpler. Skill gems, you just start out using Glacial Cascade at level 1. I think I still have my Glacial Cascade around here. Maybe I shoved it into the stash here. I'll just pull it out and just show it off. And the way it works is really not super complicated. You know, you press the button and it throws out a cone of frost damage, and it does more damage at the end. That spike at the end does more damage, so you do kind of want to line yourself with enemies so that, like, if I'm trying to kill the map device, I'd be hitting them here instead of here. That's pretty much it. the support gems that I was using for it are Martial Tempo and Primal Armament for faster attack speed and more damage. And then you could use like Long Shot for more damage on the far away. You could use a lot of different things. I went with mobility support for the most part, just so that I would move a little faster, because I was killing everything in one hit. It didn't really matter if I killed them like a lot or a little bit in one hit. It doesn't matter, so I'd rather just move more quickly. I don't remember what level it is. I think it's like level 14 or so. You're able to pick up Ice Strike. And I didn't use that for anything except bosses. I put Close Combat, Practice Combo, Crescendo, and then potentially Concentrated Effect on it if you want to do a 5-link on that. 4-linking any gem is very cheap. Qualitying up Ice Strike for more attack speed is good. Qualitying up Storm Wave, which you'll get in the level 22 range, and you'll just swap that in for Glacial Cascade. Qualitying up Storm Wave makes it so that, if I get to it here, so that it has wider waves. So if you have no quality on a Storm Wave, the waves will be very thin. If you have a lot of quality, they'll be very thick, and you can run Upheaval support, which makes you shoot out 2 additional fissures, so you're shooting out 3 lines at a time. You attack slower and you do less damage. Sounds terrible, except if I'm killing the map device here. Oh, interesting. Fun visual bug. So if I'm killing the map device here, I'm hitting him with all of my projectiles. So even though I'm attacking less quickly and doing less damage, they're all hitting him, so I'm actually doing a lot more. This was really, like, fun to kind of test, like, walk up to a guy and just blap him with one hit and watch him fall over. And then, you know, the rest of the time, you're just kind of running through areas, right-clicking and continuing to move, and everything's dying very quickly. Eventually, kind of later on, especially if you don't make any upgrades to your gear at all, you don't swap any for sort of like flat damage rings or gloves in to replace any of the like basic stuff like Blackheart and Pulsar Kelm and Yarn Griper gloves. Like if you don't replace any of those, you might want to switch over to using Tempest Bell and Mantra of Destruction for big single target fights. You know, we're talking bosses. And so the way that you set that up is very simple. You want to just Ice Strike the boss until you've built enough combo to use Mantra of Destruction. This is actually some like super important tech that I kind of figured out when I was playing my Chayula Monk, that if you use Mantra of Destruction, which makes it so that your next skill will be empowered with a bunch of extra chaos damage and also give you Purple Flames of Chayula for every enemy that you kill with that skill. If you empower your Mantra of Destruction, press Mantra of Destruction, and then press Tempest Bell, that Mantra of Destruction, all the extra chaos damage, all of the Purple Flame of Chayula generation will apply to all of the entire Tempest spell. And then you also get the extra like 15% more damage from Premeditation and Culling Strike from Murderous Intent. So you're able to get a ton of extra power onto your Tempest Bell by Mantra of Destructioning first. So that is actually pretty important. You can really see how immediately some of these monsters get nuked. Now, if you don't have enough dex in it to run Mantra of Destruction, because it is not a melee skill, Yarn Griper won't allow you to use strength to satisfy those dex in it requirements. You don't have to use it, right? It's just a thing you can do to combo in a bit more damage on Tempest Bell. Otherwise, you can just build up a Tempest Bell, drop it, and then, you know, either blast it with Ice Strikes or blast it with Storm Wave. Pretty much it. Finally, I'll just touch on some auras. I used Herald of Ice for all of the first half of the campaign. I added in Herald of Thunder later on, and then I added Herald of Ash as my last one, just simply to give myself even more clear. Definitely, I could have used some sort of defensive aura instead, but I didn't bother. I just wanted to kind of keep it offensive. Now for Herald of Ice, initially I just started out with like Magnified Effect as my first support gem on it. That's it. That's all I ran for like a long time, just to make it explode bigger, especially when I was combining it with Pulsar Kelm, where all I had to really do was a little bit of cold damage that would chill stuff, and then they would die and explode from Herald of Ice. Later on, once I got the second aura, I switched over to the sort of screen clearing tech that I've been using for my characters now, where you use Lightning Infusion on Herald of Ice to turn it basically into a lightning skill, and you use Cold Infusion on Herald of Thunder to turn it into a cold skill, and then you add, I guess I took off the increased chance to shock, I don't remember the name, but 100% more shock, you could put that on Herald of Ice so that your Herald of Ice is shocking stuff. And then I have Cold Infusion and Glaciation on Herald of Thunder, so that the Herald of Thunder is freezing stuff, and then they're kind of comboing back and forth, because Ice requires things to be frozen, but it can't freeze. Thunder requires stuff to be shocked, but it can't shock, but they can both do the opposite, and then they interact with each other very nicely. Very clever, very fun tech. And then also I put Ice Bite onto Herald of Thunder so that I would get occasional extra cold damage procs from freezing stuff with Herald of Thunder, and I put Innervate onto Herald of Ice so I could get occasional extra lightning damage procs from killing stuff with Herald of Ice. Fun. Felt very, very smart and cleared like a dream. All right, so I'll just briefly finish up here by going over the max roll build planners that I put together. Pretty much all of the builds, this is the Mercenary one, all of the builds you're really looking to come down here and take Polymathy pretty much as quickly as you can, and then you're also trying to path through all of the jewel sockets that you can along the way. Once you've done that, it's kind of up to you, but I think the best approach is to come take some of these nodes like Acceleration to give yourself some move speed, this little attack and move speed node here, Adrenaline Rush for move speed when you kill, Escape Velocity for more move speed, getting more attack speed and dexterity out of like these nodes over here is really good. This particular node, Martial Artistry, gives you a bunch of dex. That's pretty good. Wild Storm, if you want to transition into more of a lightning damage build, you can take like Frazzled for mana regen and more lightning, like shock effect. Wild Storm for more lightning damage. Lightning Rod for more damage on non-crit lightning spells, or lightning hits, because we're not doing anything with scaling crit with this build. We're just scaling our flat damage as much as we can. And then I didn't include it in this setup, but I think I included it in all the rest. If you have any mana problems at all, you can take Mental Toughness. You can Anoint Siphon. Just very like basic stuff to make it so you're not having to chug Mana Flask all the time can really help out a lot. And so, like I said, I have cooked up passive trees for all of the other classes, and they're all very similar. Like Warrior, I make a little bit of a change here since we're obviously not starting at the Mercenary spot, but we're still coming out here taking Polymathy and Jack of all trades as quickly as we can. Beef, Blurred Motion, then coming over here taking Acceleration, Maiming Strike, Escape Velocity, Dexterity, all of the same stuff. Very similar. Ranger is another one that's very similar to Mercenary since it has a very close starting point. Come down here and take Polymathy as well. One thing that I am doing differently with Ranger than everybody else is Ranger gets some move speed out of their starting points. So I am coming out here through these move speed points and taking Blur, and then I'm going down and getting Polymathy and then Escape Velocity and you know, all of the same stuff. Monk maybe has the best set of starting passives, but you still don't really want to take these all initially. These things like Essence of the Storm for more lightning damage and like Shock, and then Essence of the Mountain for more cold damage and freeze buildup. All great, but stuff you really want to come back to later. I would just purely come out here to the side, taking Strength the whole way, and then take Step Like Mist to get that move speed and those stats and that mana regen. Maybe take Siphon later on once mana becomes more of an issue, but then just again come out to Jewels and make my way down here to Jack of all trades and Polymathy, and then fill in all of the move speed, Acceleration, Maiming Strike, Escape Velocity, the exact same stuff as usual. And then Sorceress and Witch have the exact same tree because they have the same starting point, you know, but they are technically a different class. You can do whatever you want with your Ascendancy, really, it's fine. They're pretty much just making a beeline down there to the south, but I did stop and take Devoted Protector for a little bit of stats and mana regen and life regen, and then also stopped and took All Natural for a bit of free Ellie res, bit of extra damage as well, not bad. And then just all the way down here, taking Beef along the way, and then just Polymathy, Jack of all trades, Adrenaline Rush, Jewel Socket, bit of move speed here and there. So obviously all of these are taking a lot of Jewel Sockets, and what you're looking for in Jewels, you can buy green Jewels that have move speed on them. If you do that, you might have an extra 10, 12 move speed compared to someone who doesn't. That is definitely going to make you faster, and that's a good thing to have, right? Even if you just kind of take all of this leveling gear and just set it to the side and it's just your leveling setup for your next character. I have a whole tab dedicated to it. Next guy, that's what this is all for. And that's definitely a good investment to make. But if you don't want to do that, you could just use jewels like this and just have like attack damage with quarterstaffs. You know, that sort of thing can work really well. Attack damage, attack speed, very basic jewels that do actually add a lot of power if you don't want to go in a move speed direction. But obviously I have, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, potentially 6 jewel sockets that I could pick up very easily here. And if I put move speed into every single one of those, that's 12% more move speed. I could be adding basically like another 2 boots tiers worth of move speed for very, very little. So that is probably the thing that you should do if you want to go through the effort of actually trading to get those jewels. Alright, so this setup is the key to leveling insanely fast. Stat stacking is very fun. It's probably my favorite kind of build in Path of Exile, definitely my favorite speed leveling build in both PoE 1 and PoE 2. I would like some alternatives to the quarterstaff, as much fun as it is. I like monk skills, I think they're probably the most fun of any class, but I think more options would just be good to have. A quiver that functions like the Poise Prism from PoE 1 would be cool. Giving added flat damage based on your stats would be an amazing leveling unique in PoE 2. Maybe a crossbow equivalent to Pillar of the Cage God, that could be fun as well. Several more uniques that work similarly to this staff would be a good thing. I think the solution to Pillar being so powerful for leveling is not to directly nerf it or anything like that, but just simply to nerf it by association by adding, like, 5 different competing alternatives. Alright, thanks for sticking around to the end. Be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video and want to see more like it. We're pretty close to 20,000 subscribers. It's a big milestone for us, and every single like really does help the channel grow. And if you want to support us even further, consider becoming a channel member. Okay, that's it. Thanks for watching, and have fun leveling your next character. Bye.